From 2002 to 2003, Company C had what percent increase in its total sales? Well, 2002, it was here around 50. 2003, it was here around 110. And so if it starts at 50, that's the original 100%. If it goes up to 100, that's a 100% increase. And so since it went up to more than 100, it has to be more than 100% increase because it more than doubled. When you increase by 100%, you double. When you increase by more than 100%, you more than double. And that's exactly what happened here. The only one that is above 100% is answer choice E. Company C was responsible for approximately what percent of the total sales in the sector in 2007? Remember, of course, that these three companies are the only three companies in this sector. So in 2007, this company had about 20, about 30, and about 120. And so the sum of that would be 170. And we want to know 120 is what percent of 170. Now we could reach for the calculator, but let's just think about this. Notice, for example, these two together are 50. Instead of 50, if they were 60, if we had 60 and 120, then this would be 2/3 of the distribution. This would be 1/3 of the distribution. And so 2/3 would be 66%. Well, the fact that this one is smaller, it's only 50 versus 120, means that this percentage is going to be less than 1/3, and this percentage is going to be more than 2/3. So we want something slightly more than 2/3. So first of all of these answers are out. D is starting to look good. Now we may get nervous about E. What if it's really larger than 2/3? Well, in order to be 93%, it would mean that these other two companies here would have to be less than 10%. Well, 50 is not less than 10% of 170. 10% of 170 is 17. 50 is clearly larger than that. In fact, it's about 3 times that. So in other words, the other two companies cannot account for only 7% of the distribution. So this cannot be right, and D is the only possible answer. Total sales by all companies in the sector increased by approximately what percent from 1998 to 2007? Well, keep in mind that these three companies are the only three companies active in this sector. So the numbers we have on this graph, this accounts for all the sales in the sector. So in 1998, we had 5 million and 80 million. That's 85 million altogether. 2007, we had 20, 30, 120. Those add up to 170 million. So the percentage increase from 85 to 170. Well, notice 85 times 2 is 170. So in other words, the total sales doubled in that time period. Well, when anything doubles, it increases by 100%. In other words, there's the original 100% and then the new 100%, the amount that it increases. So 100% increase, answer choice C.
Well, we have 2 histograms, one for each school, and each one has SAT scores of 40 juniors. So the first school has students of varying abilities, and this histogram has kind of a bell-shaped curve. The other one is gifted students, so we have a lot of high scores there. And we get this note on rounding. A score divisible by 1,000 will be in the column below. So a score of 1,400 would appear in the column between 1,300 and 1,400. Okay, let's look at the question. The lowest possible score. So we have a single score there somewhere between 1,000 and 1,100. We don't know what it is, but we're just going to assume the lowest possible thing it could be would be 1010. So a score of 1010 would be what percentile rank among juniors at Newburgh Free School if no junior there got that exact score. So 1010 would be in this column, again from 1,000 to 1,100. And if no one got exactly that score, all the juniors in that column would have gotten scores such as 1020, 1030, 1040, up to 1,100. In other words, they would all be larger than 1010. So everything in this column, as well as these columns, all of those would be larger than 1010. And everything below that line would be smaller. So let's count these. We'll count the ones to the right because they're easier to count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. There are 12 above. 12 is what percent of 40? 12 over 40 simplifies to 3 over 10. That is 30%. So this is 30%. 30% of the scores are above 1010. 70% of the scores are below 1010. So this is a score that is above 70% of the scores of the school. So that means it's the 70th percentile. Answer choice D. As in the last question, we have the two schools, one with the wide variety of ability levels. This one has more of a bell-shaped curve, the other one with elite scores. So now we want to know how many of the columns is the number of students with a score in that category from this school, this Saleroville Academy, the one on the right, is greater than the number of students with a score in that category from the Newboard Free School, which is the one on the left. So let's go through the columns one at a time. So the column between 1500 and 1600, this column is at 10, this column is at 0, so that's 1. This column is at 10, this column is at 1, so 10 greater than 1, so that's 1. This column is at 9, this column is at 0, so that's a third column that's bigger. This column is at 7, this column is at 1, so that's a fourth column that's bigger. This column's only at 2, and the corresponding column here is at 3, so now this one is bigger, not this one. So this one doesn't count, and then this one goes down to 1, this one goes up to something much more than 1. So there are 4 columns, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 columns here that are bigger than the corresponding columns here. And so the answer is 4. This is the third question in the set. Again, we have 2 histograms, each with 40 juniors from one school. The first school has students of a variety of ability levels, so we get this kind of bell-shaped curve of SAT scores, and this school has mostly advanced students with high scores. So for this problem, we want to know the first quartile is among the 40 students at the first school. It's in what score range? So we're only concerned with the first school, the Newboard Free School. So what is the first quartile? Well, if we think of a list, we have a minimum, we have a maximum. The middle of the list is the median. That divides the list in half, and if we divide the lower half of the list in half again, that's the first quartile, Q1. And so it is the 25th percentile. It is higher than 25% of the scores. Here there are 40 scores, so we know that 20 will be above the median, 20 will be below the median, and then the quartile will divide them into 10 above the quartile and then 10 below. So it's going to be higher than the lowest 10 scores. There'll be 10 scores below the first quartile and 30 scores above it. So where do we get to the first 10 scores? Well, we have 1 here, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And so we don't know what the scores are, but it would be in this column, which goes from 700 to 800. Answer choice B.